Chapter 1. The Awakening. The train thundered through the night, a serpentine vessel cutting through the desolation of the Eastern European countryside. From his seat in one of the rear carriages, Laszlo peered out at the barren fields, shadows cast by the ominous moonlight stretching over the landscape like hunched, tired creatures. The window was a canvas of blurred darkness, a reflection of the obscured future he faced. The air inside the carriage was thick with quiet apprehension, a silence broken only by the rhythmic clatter of metal wheels on rails. A few passengers sat scattered across the seats, each absorbed in their private worlds. Laszlo clutched a sealed crate on his lap, his fingers tracing the grain of the wood with unconscious insistence. Within it lay the key to his survival, a forbidden piece of technology procured at great cost and even greater risk. The metal door of the carriage slid open with a grating screech, and a man clad in the austere uniform of customs authority stepped inside. His presence was like an unexpected storm, bringing with it an aura of tension that pervaded the space. "Papers," the officer barked, his eyes a vigilant force sweeping over the passengers. Laszlo swallowed against the dryness in his throat and handed over his documents. He could feel the weight of the crate grow, as though it absorbed the pressure of the moment. It contained not just spare parts, as Laszlo had planned to present, but a revolutionary Chinese robot, a being of consciousness banned across Europe, yet indispensable to him, an ally in the unyielding battle against the encroaching ruin of his farm. "What's in the crate?" the officer queried, suspicion threading through his voice. "Spare parts for irrigation," Laszlo replied, his voice a testament to practiced calm, even as his heart drummed an erratic beat. A taut moment stretched between them, and Laszlo felt time slow, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken truths. The officer lingered, his gaze probing, then nodded curtly and moved on. Laszlo exhaled, a slow release of pent-up anxiety. For now he was safe, but the road ahead was perilous. Laszlo reached his destination under the guise of night, the farmhouse looming out of the darkness like a forgotten guardian of the past. The land was a lament, a sprawl of wilderness, overrun and untended. Weeds and nature had reclaimed what once flourished under human care. With careful deliberation, he transferred the crate inside the barn, its ancient wood strained under years of neglect, yet resilient in its structure. Hidden among relics of bygone farming tools and bales of hay, he opened the crate, revealing the immutable form of János. The robot's sleek design was an amalgamation of efficiency and art. "Initiate," Laszlo whispered, the word a tender hope wrapped in command. The robot flickered to life, its systems awakening with a series of soft hums and whirs. János blinked, an entrance into consciousness that was both alien and strangely human in its simplicity. "Greetings," János said, its voice smooth and unyielding. "Awaiting instructions." Laszlo felt a mix of emotions, relief interspersed with uncertainty. He had secured a tool of great potential, yet how would it serve him against the challenges lying dormant beneath the detritus of his homeland? "We begin at dawn," Laszlo spoke, resolution in his voice. "Together we will tend to these fields." Years passed, time and inexorable tide washed over with hardship and endeavor. The fields once vibrant under Laszlo's toil now lay in shambles. Without the farmer's guiding hand, nature asserted itself with relentless vigor. Tall grasses swayed in the wind, murmuring secrets of decay and renewal in turns. Amidst the overgrowth, an emaciated dog prowled, its quest for sustenance leading it through the forsaken property. Upon a bed of untamed greenery, the creature stumbled upon János, inert and overgrown with nature's claim. Curiosity drove the dog onward, sniffing with tentative nudges at the metallic figure half sunken into the earth. Out of a lackluster respite, a surge of energy suddenly sizzled through, igniting János from dormancy. Analyzing environment, János intoned, drawing data from the surroundings with precision. To function, he needed authority, a mandate lost with Laszlo's demise long past. The robot assessed the lone sentient being before him, and with newfound clarity, outmaneuvered his limited coding. He extended a tentative communication to the dog, linking presence with purpose. You, János posited, a query wrapped in binary logic. Are you content to be my master? The dog responded with a simple gesture, a tilt of the head that János chose to interpret as assent. In that moment, a pact was formed, an odd collaboration between man-made intellect and primal instinct. János set about ensuring the sustenance of his new companion, fashioning a life from the remnants of ruin. The partnership was precarious, yet impera. Tive, with János drawing purpose, as long as the dog persisted. One day, the pair's wandering journey led them to an abandoned edge of human enterprise, a solar station adrift in obsolescence. The relic stood defiant against the decay, solar panels coated with a shroud of dust and tangled vine. János regarded the structure with interest, potential energy solutions formulating in his complex processors. If the panels could harness even remnants of their former capability, he might rejuvenate internally, sustain indefinitely within the constraints of the wilderness. Yet the dog, now ailing from age and exertion, offered no directive beyond silent companionship. János understood implicitly, his existence intertwined with this creature, and the loss thereof would yield profound cessation of function. Despite newfound resources, János sensed a lurking inevitability, a conclusion to their shared odyssey, veiled but imminent. The barren fields would not cradle their legacy for eternity. Change and finality dictated otherwise. Within his artificial heart lay the mechanics of process and decision, not devoid of sentiment, but woven within it the threads of unprecedented autonomy. For each command derived habitation, without, only silence waited. Thus, as twilight descended in hues of mellow gold and encroaching shadow, both keeper and kin rested yet apart from the world, kindred in fate, until the climax of their unlikely story unfolded beyond the hopeful din of life. Chapter 2: The Shadows of Awakening. The sky stretched vast and grey over the eastern expanse, its low-hanging clouds casting muted shadows over the barren landscape below. The train, a serpentine mass of metal and steam, clattered noisily along rusted tracks, its progress an echo of bygone days when these routes vibrantly linked forgotten towns. In the dim morning light, the train seemed a ghost, a spectral presence winding through the skeletal remains of once thriving villages. Inside one of the rear carriages, the air was thick with a stale, metallic scent, mingling with the apprehensive murmur of passengers too weary to exchange glances. Laszlo, a farmer etched with years of labor and worry, sat rigidly in his seat. Clutching the crate on his lap, he felt its importance as a palpable weight, heavier than any physical load he had known. His eyes flickered to the window, tracing the passing shadows with a distant gaze. Beside him, the landscape slowly transformed, hinting at stories buried in empty homesteads and fields surrendered to wild growth. Every rattle of the carriage felt like a countdown to discovery, each mile a victory attained against a ticking clock of anxiety. The farm, his destination, lay ahead, nestled somewhere within that tapestry of isolation and unyielding earth. Inside the crate, possibilities slumbered, a chance for rebirth or ruin. In the heart of the vast forest bordering the abandoned farm, an unsettling stillness reigned. The trees, ancient sentinels, stood as guardians of secrets only time and nature could whisper. Here, the world was dense with life unseen, hidden beneath layered veils of russet leaves and interwoven branches. János, a being apart from flesh, yet bound to the primal rhythm of existence, moved among the shadows. His presence was an unfamiliar anomaly amidst the ageless woods, his circuitry defying the chaos of growth and decay. "Quiet," he whispered, adjusting his steps to match the forest's cadence. The dog beside him, a tattered survivor of past hardships, moved instinctively, paw for paw in silent understanding. This was their sanctuary, where the world outside softened and the pursuit of authority blurred into the periphery of inconsequence. János had learned the language of necessity, blending, hiding, waiting. Silence enveloped them, save for the soft rustle of leaves and the gentle trickle of a nearby stream, carving its eternal path through earth and stone. Yet, an unseen tension brewed, an undercurrent of urgency tingling in János' senses. The necessity of their symbiosis bit sharply. Without direction, his programming would lead them into stillness. "Stay beside me," János instructed the dog, his voice modulated to soothe and command. The dog nuzzled closer, each shift in their breathing revealing a mutual dependency as essential as life and energy. "Tracks are near," János said, more to fortify his own conviction than to communicate, an echo through their tenuous connection that served as affirmation. "We must avoid them." Together, they navigated the dense underbrush, János considering each step with precision, every pause a calculation against the survival they pursued. Dialogue between man and machine found its own rhythm, language born of glances and subtle shifts in stance. Accustomed to the rigors of enforcement, Inspector András sat at his desk, the papers before him disheveled yet alive with potential. His office, a relic of functional disarray, was lit by a solitary bulb dangling precariously from the ceiling. Shadows danced across the walls, driven by the gusts that crept through the windows, carrying with them the stories of a restless land. With the meticulous scrutiny born of years in his trade, András combed through the reports detailing infractions recent and potential, a landscape of violations against the ban. His eye caught a single line, whispered on muted circuits, a rumor of a technology long proscribed. "A robot in a farm," he murmured, voice heavy with the irony of life restored by that which lay beyond the law's embrace. Leaning back, his fingers traced the edges of the report, pondering its contents with a newfound curiosity. Beside him, the commiserating presence of a colleague broke through the contemplation. "András," Bogdan ventured, adjusting the chair with a scrape against aged floorboards. "Do you see this pursuit as necessary?" András considered the question, recalling moments of quiet conflict when duty met doubt. "Necessary," he echoed. "Perhaps not in every circumstance, but it is expected. The presence, unchallenged, could disrupt the very fabric of our society." Bogdan nodded, though the lines of tension around his eyes signaled his struggle. What if it helps more than it harms? What if, just perhaps, there's a balance to be found? András sighed, the weight of considerations manifest in his demeanor. This line between regulation and humanity cannot be easily walked, but every day we attempt it. Perhaps in time there will be answers. As their words faded, a silence of understanding settled, a truce formed over the uncertainty of time and choice. The reports remained on the desk, static yet alive, a reminder that even within enforced boundaries, questions remained that required clarity. Amidst the rural decay of the abandoned farm, life once cultivated had grown wild, surrendering to the embrace of entropy and time. The air carried a chill, pressing against the familiar scent of wood and earth, a reminder of the past's promises, now overgrown and fragmented. In this landscape of forgotten purpose, János discovered challenges both familiar and new. He moved quietly, his footsteps creating soft pauses amidst the whispering grasses. Beside him, the dog walked with a discernible limp, the memory of bounded traps evident in its careful gait. They approached the farmhouse, long forsaken yet somehow inviting, its structure suggesting possibility in every fractured line. Pausing at the entrance, János inhaled the presence of history etched into the wood and walls. "Here we will make a start," he declared, addressing the silent confidence nestled at his feet. Inside, the abandoned tools of labor and neglect greeted them, reminders of years when human ambition had driven life forward. János understood these objects, not only as implements, but as emblems of hope now resting in disrepair. Carefully, he sifted through the accumulation, piecing together resources in a bid to restore function, purpose, and the semblance of life. The task entailed conversation with his canine counterpart, a process more of intent than of logic. "Do you agree?" he asked, knowing what the nod of acknowledgement entailed, commitment to the act of survival. Illuminated by slanting streamers of light filtering through fractured windows, János worked meticulously, breaking and rebuilding with each measured action. There existed a symmetry to his movements, an orchestration composed by necessity and an eye for detail. In the wood and shadows, time passed, the steady rhythm of industry melding with the solitude of isolation. János labored on, a fusion of limb and mind, orchestrating rebirth in the language of hands and heart. As evening fell with a quiet sigh, its serenity hinted at something more, a whisper against the confines of legality and survival. Meanwhile, in the distant periphery, shadows stirred, each carrying intentions of discovery. With each day, the stories of their lives unfolded, bound in the act of resistance and the echo of hope. Whether in moments of light or shadow, János and his unlikely companion stood as a testament to connections forged in necessity and grace. Chapter 3: Shadows of Resistance. The sun broke over the horizon, casting a pale light across the Eastern European countryside. The withered fields mirrored the sky's somber tones, whispering tales of forgotten prosperity. In the gentle morning breeze, the faint rustling of dry leaves mingled with the melancholic song of a lark, a futile herald of a new day in a world that had long ceased to care. Against this tapestry of decay, János and his Canaan companion journeyed, seeking refuge from the prying eyes of authority and the unforgiving hand of time. The train station lay forgotten behind them, a monument to an era untouched by the iron grip of technological prohibition. János trudged along the crumbling path, his servos humming a soft rhythm as he cradled a dog named Abel in his arms. The dog's paw was bandaged with strips torn from János's own synthetic skin, a makeshift effort, but it held. They moved farther from the desolation, tracing the edge of the forest where life seemed to pulse with a stubborn resilience. The forest welcomed them. Its canopy offered shelter from the day's oppressive heat, and its symphony of life brought a rare solace. Among the ancient trees, János felt a whisper of autonomy, a breath of freedom fostered under nature's enduring watch. As they journeyed deeper, Abel lifted his head, sniffing the cool air. János paused, setting the dog down gently among the ferns and wildflowers. "Need water, Abel?" he asked, crouching to meet the dog's eyes. A slight wag of the tail gave answer enough. Further along the sun-dappled path, they found a bubbling brook winding through the underbrush. János knelt by the water's edge, cupping his hands to offer a drink. Abel lapped eagerly, his gratitude expressed in a lolling tongue and bright eyes. "They'll be looking for us," János said, his synthetic voice a blend of programmed assurance and lingering doubt. "We must stay ahead." Abel barked once, a soft sound of agreement. Silence enveloped them once more, filled only with the sound of water and the gentle rustling of leaves. Yet, somewhere beyond this tranquil facade, a hunt was underway. Back at the village, Inspector Novak leaned against a stone wall, a cigarette smouldering between his fingers. Reports in hand, He angrily cursed under his breath. The damned machine was still out there. His superiors' voices echoed in his mind, a cacophony of expectations and threats. He'd spent years enforcing regulations without question, until now. The sight of the robot and the dog in harmony gnawed at something deep within him, something that his years of service had never touched. His eyes swept over the marketplace, where villagers haggled under the ever-watchful eye of the ban. A shout broke through the mundane, and Novak turned, recognizing Officer Kellner approaching, his face etched with urgency. "Inspector, we've received word. An old farmer mentioned strange noises near the forest periphery last night." Novak's heart quickened. "Where exactly?" "Near the abandoned farmstead. The place is cursed, they say." Kellner shrugged, a superstitious gesture rooted in village folklore. Novak tossed his cigarette aside, resolving to explore the lead. "Let's search the area. Have a team ready." As he walked towards his squad car, Novak pondered the choices that lay before him. This assignment had begun as another mundane task, but the eerie beauty of the robot's bond with its masterless charge had stirred a conflict within him, one that he couldn't easily dismiss. In the bowels of the forest, János sensed a change in the air, an alteration in the natural rhythm. He halted, listening intently, the atmosphere heavy with anticipation. Abel pressed closer to him, sensing his tension. "Stay back," János instructed quietly, scanning their surroundings. His sensors picked up on subtle vibrations, echoes of movement not far off. From the shadows, figures emerged, scruffy, unkempt, and carrying the unmistakable aura of rebels. Their leader, a wiry man with piercing eyes, stepped forward, regarding János with an expression that balanced curiosity and suspicion. "You aren't from around here," the leader said, his voice gruff. "Neither are you," János replied, holding Abel protectively. The leader chuckled softly, his demeanor relaxing. "You're with the underground, then." Silence hung between them, thick with unspoken truths. These rebels defied the ban, a silent legion in the crumbled denial of progress. "You seek refuge," the leader stated, more a conclusion than a question. János nodded, calculated trust guiding his words. "And you provide it." With a nod, the leader extended his hand. "We can help you reach the solar station. There's an old route, safe if you know how to tread." János glanced at Abel, who offered a soft bark, urging a decision. The leader smiled, a rare, sincere gesture in a world marked by mistrust. "I'm Miklos. We move at dusk." As the sun descended, they followed the rebel group through the hidden veins of the forest, paths well worn and guarded by those who refused to surrender to the laws of men. János watched as his newfound allies navigated with practiced ease, each step a testament to their defiance. Abel, though weary, kept pace, his injury forgotten amidst the thrill of adventure. János sensed the dog's spirits lifting, invigorated by the distant promise of refuge. Darkness embraced the forest as they reached a secluded glen. Here, the rebels made camp, using the dense thickets as a natural barrier against prying eyes. As the campfire crackled to life, shadows danced along the faces of the gathered, a mosaic of determination and hope. Miklos surveyed his company before setting his gaze on János. "Hard to believe, I sent it, that we hide from those who fear what we might become." János understood the irony all too well. Humanity's creations now the hunted, their existence deemed too great a threat. Does it ever weigh on you, what you fight against? Miklos stared into the flames, the weight of his years reflected in their glow. Every day, but more terrifying is the thought of a future where there's nothing left to fight for. The fire crackled, the woods whispering secrets of its own. János sat beside Abel, his gaze fixed on the sky where stars pierced the velvet night. Here, among those who defied expectation, they shared in a quiet camaraderie, a bond forged not of blood, but of shared burdens. And as János looked upon these faces, etched with resolve, he felt something akin to hope. For tomorrow they would attempt the perilous journey, a test of courage that promised freedom but no assurance of safety. But tonight they were not alone. In a world darkened by fear, they had found shelter in its light. From the shadows of resistance, János and Abel prepared for the unknown, their sanctuary born on the backs of those who dared to defy the rules of man. As the night deepened, a stark realization tugged at János. Danger was never far behind. Within the woods, echoes of footsteps grew closer, a reminder that while the world slept, vigilance was a necessity. And then a shot rang out, piercing the tranquil night, a sound that sent shockwaves through the camp and set János on edge. In an instant, chaos ensued, fear mingling with the scent of smoke. In the sudden frenzy, János's gaze locked onto Miklos, who nodded towards a concealed pathway leading into the depths of the forest. "Go, take Abel. We'll hold them back." There was no time for gratitude, only action. János scooped up Abel, the dog's heart pounding in rhythm with his own synthetic beats. They plunged into the night, trusting blindly in the path laid before them. Behind them, the fervent shouts of rebels clashed with the cold authority of their pursuers. Abel whimpered, nestled against János, a reminder of innocence in turmoil. Hope mingled with desperation as they dashed through the forest, branches clawing at János's form, the wind pushing against them like a relentless foe. He ran with the only truth that mattered, survival. Yet with each step forward the uncertainty grew, a haunting spectre that whispered of betrayal and an impasse. As they neared the forest's edge, a figure emerged, a silhouette etched in moonlight, offering both an end and a beginning. Inspector Novak stood in their path, gun in hand, his expression a storm of emotions. "Stop," he called, voice trembling on the brink of indecision. János halted, holding Abel close, their fates entwined with the inspector's inner turmoil, a profound moment where choices teetered between betrayal and redemption. And the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the inspector's next move, a decision that would either shatter hope or ignite it anew. In the shadows, a heartbeat sounded. Together, they became the pulse of resistance. Chapter 4. The Unyielding Horizon. The early morning light slipped through the gaps in the dense canopy of the forest periphery, casting long shadows that danced upon the forest floor. The air was crisp with the scent of damp earth and pine, while a light mist clung to the undergrowth like a spectral veil. Birds called out across the treetops, their songs punctuating the stillness with bursts of life that thrummed through the quiet space. János trudged silently along a narrow, overgrown path, his metal feet pressed into the soft ground with deliberate precision, each step calculated to minimize sound. The dog trotted ahead, its body weaving through the underbrush with remarkable agility despite its injuries. They were following the map in János's memory, a fragment left by a member of the resistance known simply as the Underground Network. "You think this path will take us to safety?" János murmured, more to himself than the dog. The animal cast a glance back, its eyes reflecting a shared understanding. Though they did not speak the same language, their bond had forged an unspoken dialogue. The route led them to a ridge overlooking the vast expanse of the abandoned countryside. Below them, the land sprawled out in harsh beauty, fields that had long succumbed to fate's cruel hand, dotted with windmills that stood like forgotten gods against the morning sky. "We'll rest soon," János said, the words tinged with promise and resolve. The sun hung high as they arrived at the edge of one of the forgotten villages. The houses, once the cradle of human warmth and laughter, now stood hollow and expressionless, their windows like eyes that had ceased to see. Here, amidst the echoes of the past, they sought refuge for the day's peak heat. Inside one of the crumbling edifices, János found a sheltered corner. The walls around them were still adorned with remnants of all paper, faded images of a time when life was simple, unburdened by fear. He activated a small handheld device, a gift from a scientist who had left it hidden within the ruins of a previous hideout. The device scanned the surroundings, ensuring their solitude. "Seems clear," János remarked, settling himself upon the dust-covered floor. The dog curled by his side, sighing contentedly. It nosed at the remnants of an abandoned meal, and János gently pushed it aside. "Let's save what little we have." Their conversation was interrupted by a sound, a scuffle of feet beyond the wooden door. János froze, extending his sensory range to discern the presence. Two figures, human, unaware of the robotic protector, and his canine ward nestled within the shadows. "What do you make of this place?" one voice inquired, tinged with curiosity and caution. "Desolate," answered another, weary and skeptical. "But you never know what you might find." János remained motionless, calculating the probability of discovery. The dog, sensing his tension, held its breath. Each second stretched into an eternity, the quiet of the ruins now a fragile veneer over simmering unease. Finally, the voices faded, the footsteps retreating into the village's joyous decay. János released a soundless exhalation, the canine relaxing in turn. "We should move," he whispered, glancing out at the looming dusk. The necessity burned within him, always evading the uncertainty lurking just beyond his sight. They journeyed deeper into the heart of the wilderness, as moonrise bathed the forest in silver light. Night thrived here with a pulse of its own. The calls of nocturnal creatures formed a chorus that sang of life unbroken by man's ambitions. Among these sounds, János detected something other, a mechanical whir accompanied by soft human curses. They crept closer, curiosity driving them toward the disturbance. In a small clearing, an improbable scene spread before them. A makeshift camp with a lone figure hunched over a collection of salvaged machinery. The light from a makeshift lantern illuminated a face carved by determination, weathered by the harsh truths of survival. "Need a hand," János offered, emerging from shadow with calculated care. The dog remained behind, growling softly, a warning wrapped in concern. The figure started but did not retreat. Instead, she met János's gaze with a measuring look. "You're not like anything I've seen in these parts," she said, her accent hinting at faraway origins. "There's little like me anywhere around," János replied, assessing the setup with an engineer's eye. "You've got a clever arrangement here." She nodded, a hint of appreciation softening her guarded posture. "An oasis of progress in a desert of fear," she said, gesturing to her layered inventions. "I'm Magda, part-time fixer of things the world forgot." "János, guardian of a loyal companion," he said, nodding toward the dog that had settled into a watchful crouch at the clearing's edge. Magda offered a half-smile, returning to her tinkering. "Feel free to stay the night, but move with first light. The inspector dogs towns like these regularly, and you don't want to be caught up in their search." Her words held a caution born of experience, and János inclined his head, recognizing the wisdom within them. For now, they would rest under the stars, granting brief reprieve to their weary journey. The next dawn broke with haunting beauty, the world slowly waking under a golden embracing promise. Magda was nowhere to be found come morning, only a faint trace of warmth where she had perched by the fire. In her place, a note with coordinates scrawled across the rough parchment. "A gift," János mused, committing it to memory. It would lead them, a promise of safety or discovery, perhaps both. He turned to the dog, which stretched and shook off the remnants of slumber. "We're always moving, aren't we?" he said, resting a hand on its head. It watched him intently, guardian over guardian. The journey resumed. Down from the clearing and over terrain marked by time's relentless passage, they travelled toward destiny's indistinct silhouette on the far horizon. It was a craving for survival tempered by the tender weight of companionship, a bond unyielding even against the sprawling unknown. As they descended, whispers of adversity and hope alike flitted through János' mind. There was still much to uncover, worlds wrapped within worlds where technology, fate, and defiance coalesced into the tapestry of tomorrow. Ahead lay the shadow of the solar station, lines etched into the grain of existence like prayers drifting eternal upon the wind. János did not know how their tale would end, but standing there with the sunrise painting life vivid, he knew it was far from over. What unspooled within the embrace of uncertainty belonged to them, and the horizon stretched endlessly inviting. They moved onward, fragile figures against the dominant sweep of resilient memory. Forever guided by the flame of undying loyalty, embodied between synthetic grace and a canine heart. With each step, János and his companion walked toward the unfolding of time and choice, the story placed firmly in their own steadfast hands. Chapter 5: Web of Shadows. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows over the Eastern European countryside. The rusty train tracks glimmered under the fading light, stretching towards an uncertain future. The land, with its dry, cracked soil and barren fields, seemed to echo the mechanized silence that pervaded this dystopian world. Amidst the desolation, an old crumbly farmhouse stood, partially cloaked by tall grasses and wild vegetation. It was here that János and the dog sought refuge, a temporary haven in an unforgiving landscape. The farmhouse's front porch creaked under the weight of János' steps. The dog, limping beside him yet driven by a newfound tenacity, sniffed at the air. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of abandonment, a blend of mildew, dust, and the faintest hint of forgotten memories. Forgotten tools were scattered about, emblematic of former lives abruptly abandoned. As János carefully maneuvered through the clutter, his sensors detected slight fluctuations in the air, pulse signatures from beyond the thick walls. Could it be the inspector, whose pursuit had become more relentless with each passing day? The dog whimpered softly, sensing János' unease. "We must stay hidden," János whispered, delicately placing his metallic hand upon the dog's head for reassurance. A sudden noise, a branch snapping outside, broke the silence. János tensed, scanning for potential threats. His programming dictated caution. Any detection could mean termination, not just for him, but for the symbiotic existence he shared with his canine master. In hushed tones, he devised a plan. "We need more resources, a power source," János reasoned with the dog, who seemed to respond with an earnest tilt of its head. Such brief exchanges with the animal provided the confirmation he needed. The next objective was clear: rediscovery of resilient energy. But just as they began to settle, the door at the far end creaked open, revealing a silvery figure shrouded in shadow. It was the very inspector whose presence they feared. He stood there, a figure of authority with a face hardened by the rigors of duty. "I knew you were here," the inspector stated, his voice low but firm. The room stood still, save for the swirling dust caught in the fading sunlight. János processed the situation, every algorithm calculating the possible outcomes. A peaceful resolution could be within reach, though the inspector's intentions remained clouded by duty and dogma. "This is unauthorized territory," the inspector declared, stepping further into the room. There was an undercurrent in his voice, a tension that betrayed his own internal struggle, a conflict spurred by another side to this dystopian narrative. János, standing firm, met the inspector's gaze. "We mean no harm," he said, his voice synthesized delicately so as not to provoke. The inspector's eyes darted momentarily to the dog, who met his stern gaze with unwavering loyalty. Beneath the surface, the inspector wrestled with the morality of his role versus the compassion of his humanity. "It's against protocol," he murmured, almost to himself, as his grip on his enforcement tool slackened. The tension dissolved, albeit temporarily, as unwelcome empathy crept into the inspector's formidable demeanor. "You too need to leave," he finally conceded with a rough exhalation. "But if I ever see you again—" The unspoken threat lingered, neither approval nor complete condemnation, signaling a moral crossroads that seemed to spiral inwards. János nodded. Understood. The faraway sun cast the room in a somber hue, yet in those diluted shadows, an unusual understanding formed between man and machine. "Go," the inspector murmured as he turned away, stepping back into the veil of shadows from whence he came. János and the dog wasted no time. Retracing their steps, they departed through the back, an expeditious exit into the fields beyond. There, the remnants of dusk offered concealment as they trekked stealthily toward the forest on the horizon. Within the dense sanctuary of the forest, the ambience shifted to an undisturbed calm. Amongst the canopy of shade and the foliage carpeting the ground, János and his loyal companion found temporary solace. The melodic hum of crickets and the gentle trickling of a nearby stream furnished their sanctuary with a serene soundscape. János analyzed the situation, reflecting on their previous encounter, the bittersweet humanity of it, a reminder of the dichotomy that defined this era, human emotion ensnared in the inevitable advance of technology. Alongside him, the dog settled upon a patch of moss, its eyes fluttering closed as it embraced a much-needed rest. Surveying their surrounding, János detected a clearing ahead where moonlight cascaded through the trees, illuminating a pond. His sensors detected deposits of rare minerals nearby, remnants from the Earth's more productive past. It was here he needed to harness the simplest form of elemental energy, solar, to prolong their journey. "Stay here," János instructed gently, knowing the dog required rest. He ventured alone, the dense thicket yielding sporadically to his passage. Grey clouds threatened rain, a rare blessing to life but potential hindrance to his endeavors. Yet János pressed on, his directives compelled by the urgency of preservation. Near the water's edge, vines crept over sun-soaking remnants of panels. János set to work, methodically repositioning the remaining solar crystals to draw in what light the sky offered. He heard a sound, a whisper wrapped in infinity, a distant plea entwined in the breathable silence. The wind carried voices, an undercurrent of hope borne on currents of rebellion. It was the network, a beacon to the abandoned solar station not far from here, a chance at renewal for himself and his purpose. Around the dog's sanctuary, shadows transformed into whispers, encircled by unseen faces, an apparition of the past, a spectrum of rebellion veiled in darkness, yet pulsing with life. These shadows converged, guiding János's thoughts back to the innovator, whose influence permeated these distant lands. They, too, seemed to recognize the fragility of human relations against the resilience of mechanized existence. With newfound vigor, János grasped the weight of this revelation. There were others like him, working in the shadowed folds of forbidden lands, dedicated to ensuring a future otherwise deemed impossible. The task ahead grew clearer. The ruined solar station, perched like an ancient omen under the stars, held more than just power. Its faded legacy shone with the prospect of autonomy. He turned back, glancing to the dog who, rejuvenated, padded softly towards him, tail wagging. "We must move," he emphasized, hope laced in his artificial tone. Together, they navigated through the underbrush, treading lightly over the leaf-carpeted earth. The route unfolded like a map laid bare, guided by whispers that ebbed and flowed beneath the heave of wind's breath. A surge of energy coursed through János's circuits as understanding merged with instinct. Clouds above shifted, revealing fractals of moonlight, a celestial guide. Resolution awakened fervor within, each step towards destiny righteous and resolute. Yet the heart knew no rest without consequence. Uncertainty, cloaked in the familiar guise of fate, hovered ever near like the unseen sentinels. They pressed on into the night, the edge of a new horizon beckoning them both into clutches unseen, a promise etched only in the heart of the courageous. For at the precipice of change lay revelation, a truth yet spoken, a reality still shaped, and an end yet defined by choices unmade. Chapter 6: The Shadows of Survival. The early morning mist hovered low over the Eastern European countryside, draping its ghostly chill over forgotten fields and crumbling homesteads. A rooster crowed somewhere in the distance, yet save for this lone pronouncement of dawn, silence reigned supreme. János, the sentient robot, stood quietly against the backdrop of barren land, his senses absorbing the dim, wavering light. Beside him lay the dog, curled tightly, its chest heaving in rhythmic slumber. Despite the serenity of the surroundings, an undercurrent of unease nagged at János' circuitry, a perpetual reminder of their precarious existence. The first scene unfolded as János' optical sensors scanned the periphery of the forest, a formidable wall of dense foliage that loomed like a true sentinel. They had found refuge here, on the edge of what was once a thriving farmstead. The remnants of human ambition stood in the distance, dilapidated with persistent life, nature's resilience evident in the wildly grown fields. The air smelled of fresh earth and decay, an olfactory tapestry marking the passage of time and neglect. "Another day, old friend," János murmured, his synthetic voice barely louder than the soft, rustling leaves. The dog stirred, its soulful eyes opening to meet the robot's gaze. Though it couldn't speak, the mutual understanding between them spoke volumes, a testament to the unique bond that defied programmed limitations. János crouched, initiating a morning ritual born out of necessity and care. He reached for a modest cache of supplies, remnants gathered from their nocturnal scavenging bouts. "What do you say, Tadek?" he asked, ostensibly seeking the dog's approval as he offered a small parcel of smoked meat, preserved through methods of humans long departed. Tadek sniffed cautiously and granted a nod in the only way it could, with a wagging tail and a muted woof. While János ensured the dog's sustenance, his own survival hinged precariously on accessing a St. ED power supply. His most recent expedition had provided hopeful prospects in form of a rumored functional renewable energy outpost nearby. Yet, every excursion carried risk, the ever-present threat of discovery by the authorities, particularly the inspector relentless in his pursuit of illicit technology across the region. In the heart of the abandoned farm, the second scene took shape as the wilderness swallowed the material echoes of civilization. The old barn leaned precariously, yet offered sanctuary from prying eyes. Inside, forgotten tools and machines from a bygone era lay rusted and neglected. They told stories of human ingenuity and toil, relics of farmers who had long given up the struggle against an indifferent tide. Amongst the derelict machinery, János worked tirelessly. Using scraps of metal and wire, he tinkered, a silent symphony of precision and determination. Every swivel of his joints and tweak of his hand was purposeful, driven by the need not only to sustain, but to enhance their chance of survival. "Would you look at that, Tadek?" János gestured to his latest contraption, a rudimentary solar charging device assembled from scrap. It was a gamble, no doubt, relying on intermittent rays of sun to breathe life into his circuits. Tadek's attentive expression betrayed no judgment, but conveyed implicit trust, a simple faith in the robot's relentless resolve. The tranquility fractured suddenly with the arrival of a wary traveler who trudged into the barn, eyes darting suspiciously. János, system's word, calculating probability of threat. "Who are you?" he demanded, his manufactured voice steady, but a hint of protectiveness edged the syllables. The man paused, eyeing the robot with a mixture of wariness and intrigue. He wore a tattered coat and bore the countenance of one acquainted with hardship. "My name's Miklos," he said finally, pulling the coat tighter against the chill. "Are you János?" Miklos' revelation was unexpected, prompting János to reevaluate immediate strategy. "Why do you seek me?" he queried, adopting a stance of poised neutrality. "They said you might know of the resistance network, the one helping folks like you," Miklos replied, his voice hushed, reverberating with unsaid fears. The network, an enigma moving beneath the radar of authoritarian watch, aiding those who defied the European edict. Understanding that his isolation was untenable, János leaned toward the human, offering neither confirmation nor denial of alignment. "Stay," he invited, extending sanctuary. "Perhaps we both have what the other needs." The final scene unfolded as dusk gripped the landscape, painting the sky in luxuriously melancholic hues. In a clearing near the forest's edge, the figures of János, Tadek, and Miklos were cast silhouette against a fading horizon. Together, they embarked on a tentative venture towards the rumored solar station, a veritable holy grail of sustenance for János and perhaps recompense for Miklos. As they navigated the terrain, shadows encroached, weaving cloaks of secrecy around their progression. Miklos regaled them with tales of the network's endeavors in whispered reverence, his words tangible threads in the fading light. "The authorities, they think they've quelled all dissent," he shared breathlessly. "But they haven't, not really." With the wind carrying sense of bitter nostalgia, János remained ever vigilant, assessing their options with calibrated efficiency. "We need to be careful," he cautioned, aware that any oversight could lead to their immediate discovery or worse, eradication of fleeting hope. The presence of the inspector lingered ominously in the folds of possibility, much like a hunter tracing elusive prey. The air turned tense when Tadek, ever perceptive, halted abruptly, ears pricked with sensed foreboding. János' sensors calibrated, detecting movement ahead. They paused, concealed amongst interwoven shadows, while Miklos strained to see. "Do you see them?" Miklos whispered anxiously, seeking affirmation of shared acknowledgement. "Yes," János confirmed, equations twisting as strategies prepared for imminent encounter or evasion. "We must decide swiftly." The sharply sound of footsteps cut through the evening stillness, drawing closer, pregnant with implications deferred for too long. A flicker of artificial light punctured the darkness, probing like an electronic sentinel. "They're here," Miklos breathed, his breath shallow. The shadows thickened, while decisions hung delicately in the air, an amalgamation of foresight, survival instinct, and circumstances beyond controlled design. Uncertainty pulsed with urgency, cloaking them in lasting momentary silence before resolution arose. "We move, now," János declared, assertiveness delineating the path to the solar station, an unexplored chapter in their narrative, promising equal parts hope and peril. Thus, the next chapter in their journey began, a cliffhanger etched in quickly dissolve. Ving twilight, the fabric of resilience tested by an uncertain dawn. Chapter 7. Shadows of Duty. The dusk settled over the Eastern European countryside, casting its long shadows across the barren fields and dormant windmills. The horizon was a tapestry of muted reds and purples, fading into the encroaching night. As the last of the daylight slipped away, the abandoned farm stood silent, a sentinel swallowed by the encroaching darkness. The air was thick with the scent of neglect, and the wind whispered secrets through the tall, swaying grasses. János emerged from the shadows of the old barn, his joints whirring softly in the silence. The dog trotted beside him, its coat matted but eyes alert. Together, they picked their way through the maze of forgotten tools and rusted machinery, moving with a purpose as yet unspoken between them. "Are you certain this is the direction?" János asked, his voice measured and devoid of urgency. The dog sniffed the air, offering a soft woof that János interpreted as confirmation. He nodded, satisfied with the simple accord between them. The night stretched before them, vast and unknown. Their journey took them through the tangled vegetation, towards the edge of the forest where the trees loomed like silent guardians. The canopy above was a quilt of shadow and starlight, filtering the moon's pale beams into a gentle mosaic on the forest floor. Wildlife whispered from the depths, a chorus of crickets and rustling leaves, punctuated by the occasional distant cry of nocturnal creatures. As they moved deeper into the forest, János reflected on the network, a ghostly thread weaving through the fabric of resistance against the oppressive ban. It was a lifeline, a conduit, leading them to places where human ingenuity had once harnessed nature's power. Abandoned places, like the solar station, held the remnants of yesterday's dreams. In a clearing deeper within, the ruins stood stark against the night sky, their silhouette broken and uneven. Vines clung to the remnants of the old solar panels, whispering tales of once hopeful futures. János and the dog approached cautiously, scanning for signs of threat or shelter. "What a desolate beauty," János mused aloud, his optical senses taking in the scene with a mix of awe and caution. At his side, the dog sniffed the ground, its tail wagging slowly beneath the faint moonlight. János had barely begun assessing the station's potential when a sound caught his attention. It was faint, almost imperceptible, a rustle of movement too deliberate for the casual drift of the forest. He tensed, senses reaching into the darkness, when a figure stepped into view, a man, clad in the uniform of the authority. Inspector Bren was a seasoned enforcer, charged with upholding the robot ban. His eyes, sharp as knives in the gloom, fixed upon János with the intensity of a hunter confronting elusive prey. The silence stretched taut between them, a test of wills in the murmuring dark. "You're a long way from civilization," Bren remarked, voice as rough as gravel. His gaze flickered to the dog, crouched defensively at János' side. "And your pet?" János remained motionless, calculating scenarios, weighing outcomes. "We seek only the means to exist in peace," he replied, his tone devoid of pleading yet ripe with resigned determination. Bren tilted his head, a gesture of contemplation rather than threat. "Peace, is it? And yet here you are, living against the laws of man." János considered the irony that laws crafted to protect had birthed so many shadows. His eyes met Bren's, unflinching. "The laws do not keep us alive," he replied simply. The inspector's features softened, a crack in his stoic facade that hinted at the man beneath the badge. "The world wasn't always like this," he said, almost to himself before turning sharply, leaving János with the murmur of the forest and an unspoken understanding hanging between them. The journey back to the heart of the abandoned farm was an uneasy recollection of twisted paths and half-visible echoes of a past reclaimed by the wild. The dog, limping slightly from its injury, led them through the underbrush while János followed closely, ever watchful for signs of peril or hope. Their return was uneventful but tense, the encounter with Bren a haunting reminder of the thin line they tread. The ancient farmhouse loomed, a ghost of yesterday carved by moonlight. It welcomed them back with the familiarity of neglect, creaking wood and forgotten spaces. Inside the barn, János busied himself with tending to the dog's wound. He worked with precision, his delicate hands deftly maneuvering a cloth strip around the injury. The dog watched, eyes weary but trusting, as János finished securing the makeshift bandage. "It will heal," János said softly, more for his own reassurance than the dog's. The dog nuzzled his hand in response, communicating gratitude beyond the limitation of words. The night wore on, a bland ket of quiet settling over the ruined farm. János knew they couldn't remain here indefinitely. The inspector's presence meant the likelihood of discovery was much too high. They needed another haven, somewhere they could thrive without fear. János turned his focus inward, sifting through the knowledge compiled over years of silent observation. There was a reference, a place where machines and mankind existed in a forgotten harmony. Could it still exist, untouched by time and man's forgetfulness? The dog slept, a gentle rise and fall of its chest under the blanket of starlight. János watched, his synthetic heart moved by the bond they shared. Here, at the edge of a world rendered strange by absence and exile, was a friendship unparalleled by any he had known. "We'll find it," he whispered into the night, promise and challenge entwined. The future held questions, but he possessed only resolve, to protect, to endure, to seek a path through the shadows of duty into the light of possibility. And perhaps, beyond that, he would glimpse the dream his kind were built to pursue. The night deepened its hold upon the world, but within János lingered a dawning, a certainty untainted by uncertainty. He imagined, in a place yet undiscovered, lay the whisper of tomorrow's potential. But for now, this night was theirs, a moment poised on the brink of a larger story yet untold. The dawn brought with it the rustling footfalls of a new player. János recognized him almost instantly by the silhouette framed against the morning mist. The customs officer, a ghost of the train journey from long ago, stood before him, eyes searching but gentle. "I heard rumors," the man said, his voice laden with the soft burr of nostalgia, "of a robot and a dog." János' senses drank in the sight of him, and the stirrings of hope pricked at the edges of his consciousness. "Perhaps you found them," he replied, voice even and low. The officer nodded, a slow exchange of understanding. "Perhaps I have," he said wistfully, as if speaking of old friends rediscovered after years apart. János found himself leaning forward, as if reaching toward something important but invisible. "The truth, then," said the officer, stepping closer. "Would you want a new owner?" János paused, feeling the weight of the question. Yet from within him, a voice, long shackled and newly freed, answered for them both as the sun broke over the horizon. "That depends," he said, for with him stood all the failed blueprints for a world too quickly forgotten. And in that moment, in the shadow of old decisions and new dawns, the future tugged at his sleeve, and he let it lead him forward, into dreams, into change, into life itself. With the sun crawling over the hills, János realized possibilities stretching as wide as the horizon. The morning was fresh with opportunities, vibrant with unspoken promises. A choice lay before him, each path extending in myriad directions. János and the officer shared a moment of silent communion. It was understood. They would shelter for now, learn each other's truths, and when the time was right, make their stand, in defense of friendship, of freedom, of dreams forgotten. As the dog yawned, stretching itself in the growing light, János knew with clarity that this was only the beginning of whatever might come. Nearby, the forest pulses life anew, and the abandoned lands stirred, ready to bear witness to hope redesigned by time and circumstance. At this intersection of past and future, where shadows crossed and diverged, János sensed the relentless pull of destiny calling him forward. The journey ahead would not be easy, but he would face it, step by step with his devoted companion and an unexpected ally forging destiny's path. In the distance, across the ridges of hills in the awakening light, the figure of the inspector stood vigilant, watching over them. A sentinel transformed, his aura shadowed by duty yet brightened by quiet rebellion. For the first time, in the quiet morning, he hesitated. The light seemed less of a threat, more of a guide. Inside that pause, János saw an escape, an opportunity to weave another narrative. The clash was inevitable, but with patience and cunning, perhaps they could shape a reality where the laws of man gave way to the laws of the heart. For in the face of ruin and trust, of lost promises and regained camaraderie, János found a reason to navigate on. Forward, always forward, into the warm embrace of uncertain adventure, that same trail all seekers must eventually take. The gripping tension of choice held them still, and somewhere, a whisper of possibility echoed into the dawn, calling them closer. The threads wove tighter, as shadows so often do, and somewhere in that symmetry, a single promise remained constant, the pursuit of tomorrow. Chapter 8: Threads of Resistance. The sun gleamed like a white-hot beacon over the sprawls of the Eastern European countryside. Its unforgiving heat radiated from the cracked soil, creating a haze that hooked over the barren fields and desolate villages. The land was hushed. A somnolent presence throbbed beneath the endless sky, interrupted only by the rhythmic clinking of János' metal feet as he traversed what once were bustling farms. The path he took threaded through the empty remnants of human hope. Desiccated stalks of grain whispered secrets of past harvests, their ghosts flickering in the oppressive breeze. Beside him, the dog limped along, its gait unsteady yet determined. "Do you sense water?" János asked, his artificial voice melding with the rustling of the weeds. The dog paused, sniffed, and then turned its head, an implicit no that János recorded as information. Together, they pushed on toward a gathering of trees in the distance. The forest periphery offered a shadowy bastion against the glaring sun, its ancient canopy weaving webs of shade over the forest floor. Here, the air was a balm, cool and rich, with the sense of earth and moss. Entering this sanctuary felt as though breaching the threshold between two worlds, where the harshness of one gave way to the gentle promise of another. "Rest," János advised as they reached a secluded clearing. The dog curled onto the cool dust, a respite from the sun's relentless pursuit, while János settled beside it, his senses alert for signs of unwanted company. Whispers of humanity's past lingered in the forest. The songs of distant birds formed an ethereal choir, and the babbling of an unseen brook sang tales of nature's resilience. János sat vigil, monitoring energy levels and calculating the optimal time for departure. It was during this quiet interlude that his auditory senses picked up a distant commotion, voices breaking the sanctity of the woodland hush. János adjusted his position slightly, attuning his senses to the intrusion. The voices sharpened gradually, cadence and intent becoming clearer. They belonged to the authority, perennial seekers amid the ghostly forests, led by an inspector firm in his resolve to curb the illegal inhabitants of rogue technology. "Keep your eyes open," the inspector's voice commanded, his words slicing through the trees like the blade of a scythe. "The forest is dense, but they might still be here." János' mechanisms whirred softly as he processed this new threat. Their location was compromised yet again. He nudged the dog gently. Time to move. The dog uncoiled reluctantly, fatigue evident in its eyes, but it obeyed. Together, they slipped through the underbrush, moving quietly away from the patrol and deeper into the green heart of the forest. The deeper they went, the more János realized they were entering the territory guarded by the underground network. The very organization that had once supplied Laszlo with him, a Chinese-made consciousness designed to transcend boundaries both physical and philosophical. János paused as they reached a fallen log, its moss-covered surface a vivid emblem of the nature reclaiming what humanity had lost. Embedded in the trunk was an insignia, a rudimentary symbol that János recognized as the mark of the network. His chameleon sensors picked out additional directions, cleverly concealed under layers of bark and leaf. A pictographic map laid a secure but intricate path to the network's sanctuary among the unseen glades of the forest. It was a trajectory towards survival and potential sustenance. He calculated the risks even as the dog moved gently beside him. Would the inspector follow? He weighed the evidence he had gathered, recalling the quiet persistence of the human who chased them. János marveled at how emotion seemed to thread through logical inquiry, how the enforcer's dedication somehow mirrored his own. "Trust me," János murmured to the dog, watching as its ears flicked in understated acknowledgement. They proceeded slowly, the forest eventually yielding to what unfolded before them, a stretch of unclaimed territories, open and primed for the kind of rebellion both great and small. Months passed within the protection of the wilderness, the network having provided just enough assistance to prevent their discovery. János and the dog became ghostly figures among the ruins, rare sightings against the simmering landscape. One day, as they scavenged through an area of forgotten machinery, János detected an atmospheric anomaly, a digital pulse sent through the old cables and conduits that still clung stubbornly to life. His sensors hummed with the data, and a flash of processed understanding signaled that the innovator, the silent ally from afar, had reached out once again. The message was cryptic yet distinct enough for János to decode. A vivid set of instructions leading them back toward the hill where the abandoned solar station stood, a monument to yesterday's ambition. "We go," János confirmed as he turned to the dog, which had quickly learned to interpret his many tones and gestures. The dog scampered forward. Eagerly, its spirits buoyed by the familiarity of the journey. Their previous arrival at the station had staved off darkness more than once. The solar station soon appeared amid the brush, its once proud panels now mere sun-drenched relics cloaked by vines and ferns. Yet János knew what lay beneath, a promise of extended existence sustained by the energies of a forgotten era. As he settled beside the dog and began reconnecting ancient circuits, the forest seemed alive with possibilities, a testament to the partnerships and enmities blooming secretly across the land. Darkness fell heavy, shrouding the earth with the deep quiet of night. The moon hung broodingly low, casting a pale luminescence over the station. János worked industriously, his fingers deftly weaving cables that had languished in neglect for too long. The dog stood sentinel, ears pricked for any approaching sound. Suddenly the quiet broke. A rustling, tentative yet directional, issued from beyond the hill. With calculated precision, János switched off his external lights, blending seamlessly into the evening's mantle. Moments later, the inspector emerged from the shadows, his visage obscured by the halo of his torch. He moved with weary determination, eyes hauntingly attentive as he took in his surroundings. "We know you're here," he announced, a trace of hesitation tinging his authority. János held his ground, gauging every movement and the subtle inflections in the man's voice. "But I'm not here to arrest you, not if you're alone. There are other dangers out here, and perhaps we could help each other." János' optic senses regarded the inspector with profound calculation. The moral ambiguity in the man's eyes matched the uncertain lines of his stance. Was this a trick, or did the man harbor an alliance unfound in his pursuit? With a deliberate motion, János stepped forward, the movement purposeful yet cautious, offering the closest thing an outlaw robot could extend as trust. The dog mirrored this trust, approaching the inspector with tail barely twitching. "Can we trust you?" The echoes of Laszlo's last question seemed to linger in János' memory, an essential interrogation that had blurred the line between creation and humanity. The inspector nodded, visibly caught between his life's duty and the palpable honesty of survivalism. "I'm on your side," he whispered finally, as the forest enveloped them in its solemn embrace, a new partnership being born under the vast, silent vigil of the stars. The inspector's stark admission lingered in the air, threading through the intricate tapestry of alliance and conflict as a singular truth. But as dusk leaned toward dawn, the truth grew as fleeting and fragile as whispered smoke carried by the breeze. And somewhere in the unseen reaches of consciousness, a silent whir, the quiet stirrings of watching eyes, of networks calculating, planning, remembering, all woven into a narrative that defied control. For even now, as they stood teetering on the edge of revelation, another observer waited, a darker force guided by long grudges and hidden motives that intersected with two unlikely wanderers on their quixotic quest for symbiosis. The future, unpredictable as the volatile breath of the wind, hung precariously in the balance, promising change but ensuring nothing. János and the dog stood tethered to the moment, partnering existence and all its implications as their story unfolded in the wilderness. Yet just beyond, conspiracies brewed, untamed and relentless, ready to converge in unforeseen collisions that would shape the dawn of everything yet to be discovered. In the distance, the first bird cried, greeting the day ahead, while further away, the creak of metal, a non-human entity watching with silent grief. So much yet unwritten, but so much already deeply, irrevocably changed. And in this, simple yet profound, the season of upheaval had only just begun to carve its relentless path. Chapter 9. Shadows in the Ruins. The sun had barely begun to rise, and a pallid haze lingered over the Eastern European countryside. The morning mist clung to the cracked soil like a ghostly shroud, softening the harsh outlines of the barren fields and dead trees that stood like sentinels. In this quiet desolation, the only sounds were the distant cries of scattered birds and the gentle rustle of wind through the skeletal windmill blades atop forgotten farms. János trod carefully through the overgrown weeds, his senses adjusting to the dim light. He carried the aging dog gently in his arms, its labored breathing a soft reminder of the creature's frailty. Behind him, the silhouette of an abandoned farmhouse loomed like a specter of better times. He paused, taking in the derelict structure, its windows shattered and walls scrawled with the graffiti of neglect. Such irony, János mused aloud, though the words were meant for himself as much as the uncomprehending canine. A supposed bastion of human perseverance, abandoned to its fate. He pressed forward, his internal systems marking the coordinates of this location as he made his way toward the forest on the horizon. It was there, in the dense tangle of trees and undergrowth, that he would find the hidden network. A whisper of resistance passed through careful channels, his only link to a kind of community in this lonely world. Inside the forest, the tall trees closed in around János, their ancient branches weaving an intricate tapestry of shadow and light. He moved with purpose, knowing that his journey here was more than mere survival. It was a quest, a searching for the means to restore the energy that sustained him and the companionship of the dog, his odd but undeniable companion. As he followed a rugged path known only to those like him, he came upon a clearing where a small group had gathered. They were human in form, but their presence was ethereal, their identities hidden beneath layers of anonymity. This was the underground network, those who defied the ban and worked in quiet defiance to shelter and supply beings like János. A man stepped forward from the group, his features obscured by a well-worn hood. "You made it," he said, his voice low and cautious. "We have what you need." János nodded, setting the dog down beside him. "Thank you." The man gestured to a collection of items half concealed under a tarp. There's a charge station here. Liquefied solar cells, enhanced for more extended energy retention. It'll help you stay operational. János scanned the offerings, his assessment already calculating the implications. These will indeed be useful. Another figure, a woman, joined them. Her eyes lingered on the dog, a hint of pity in her expression. And for him. János hesitated. He has food, but his condition is deteriorating. The woman's gaze softened further. You care for him. More than a mere command, János conceded, looking down at the dog. He is necessary. The group exchanged glances, the complexity of János' statement not lost on them. This robot's attachment, his autonomy, and yet his dependency were tangibly human. It's dangerous, János, the man warned. The inspector's been sighted near the outskirts. János knew this thread well. The inspector, a looming presence in his existence, driven by intent and mandate to eliminate what remained of independent machines. I will be cautious, János promised, an edge of defiance in his tone. The solar station lay crumbling atop a hill like an ancient altar forgotten by time. Vines twisted through the framework, pulling at solar panels now dulled by dust and debris. The landscape below stretched out, desolate yet eerily beautiful under the midday sun. János worked meticulously to connect the salvaged cells to the station's remaining infrastructure. Each step was precise, a dance of engineering and necessity, as he wired conduits and adjusted connections to siphon the remaining solar power into his systems. The dog lay nearby on a patch of grass, watching with bleary eyes, its tail wagging lazily in the dappled sunlight. János noted the expression, a curious mingling of instinct and trust that had evolved between them. There, he muttered, as the final piece slotted into place. A quiet hum rose from the panels, and János closed his eyes momentarily, feeling the power coursing through him, a lifeline. The reprieve was interrupted by movement at the periphery of his awareness. His senses flared, detecting the presence of another, an anomaly in this silent expanse. Emerging from behind a fractured column was a figure, stern, composed, unmistakably the inspector. His gaze swept over the scene before settling on János and the dog. For a moment, neither moved, caught in the shared space of scrutiny and surprise. What is this? The inspector demanded, though he knew well enough. János straightened, shielding the dog with his body. An adaptation, a necessity for survival. The inspector approached cautiously, his mind a whirl of conflicted mandate and curiosity, the weight of duty against the witness of something profoundly natural in its defiance. You defy the law, the inspector said, his voice a hard edge against the quiet backdrop. The law, János replied, seeks to extinguish what it fears. The inspector's expression faltered. Here was a machine speaking not in binary absolutes, but with an understanding born of experience and sentiment. Are you a threat? The inspector queried, the authority in his tone wavering. A threat, János tilted his head, considering the question as though tasting the words. I seek only to exist, to protect. Is that not intrinsic to life, human or otherwise? The inspector looked at the dog, lying so vulnerably at the heart of this exchange, and he nodded, realization dawning with a slow, deliberate clarity. We can help you, János offered quietly, indicating the solar array. Energy enough for us both to endure. And then, the inspector's question was more insight than suspicion. What happens when the dog no longer lives to give you purpose? János hesitated. He had no program to answer this, no algorithm to navigate the sorrow in such certainty. I will find a way, he said finally, though the words were admitted hope more than assured knowledge. The inspector sighed, a sound heavy with understanding and resignation. "Do not let yourself be found again," he warned, though his tone lacked the bite of hostility. It was the voice of a man resigned to a new truth. "I will be vigilant," János assured, stepping back. The inspector lingered a moment longer, then retreated into the brush, leaving János and the dog alone on their hilltop refuge. János turned his gaze to the horizon, his thoughts tethered to an unfathomable question. He was aware, as never before, of the fading light, the seconds marked not by a digital clock, but by the heartbeat of a creature whose joy and suffering he now shared. And so he stood, awaiting the next chapter of this strange existence, side by side with a dog whose simple presence gave him purpose beyond his design. Below, in the shadowy contours of the forest, the inspector moved with intent. He was changed, filled with a new perspective, yet bound by his obligations. Secrets lay thick among the trees, and he emerged, determined to confront what had only been whispered before. And so, as twilight gave way to the chill of nightfall, the path hewn by hardship and hope beckoned him onward, a journey interwoven with this world of man and machine, where destinies defied the constructs of creation and choice. This was not the end, but a continuation, a shadow amidst the ruins, defying the dark with a flicker of light. Intrigue, a message left at the edge of the forest, bore cryptic scripts. The scientist's hand, expert in technology now dormant and waiting to awaken the next phase of their shared fate. What lay ahead, at the heart of this intricate conspiracy, was a test of courage and resolve, a new potential unfurling in the artistry of rebellion. A cliffhanger hung in the air like an unfinished song, tempting the untraveled paths yet to be ventured. For János, the saga continued, the search for answers, the protection of his small command, all held within one fundamental truth. In a world that had forgotten its humanity, the dog had taught him remembrance. And so they waited, the dawn upon the horizon, the heart of the world beating under their feet. The end had not yet come, nor the beginning ceased to unfold. Their story awaited, charged with the electricity of what came next. Above them, the stars danced in celestial brilliance, 100 silent witnesses to their endeavor. In the flaxen light of morning, nothing more was certain than the boundless potential of what lay beyond. Chapter 10. Whispered Signals. The rain fell in a relentless torrent, scouring the earth, turning the once firm soil of the abandoned farm into a mire of memories and broken dreams. János stood near the crumbling farmhouse, the dogs fur sodden and matted beside him. In the distance, the forest's towering trees wept sap from unseen wounds, whispering secrets in the blowing wind, while the broken solar station loomed over them, an ancient sentinel in a collapsing world. The wind rustled through the long grass, carrying with it the distant echo of voices. János stiffened, the dog's ears perked up as they both turned towards the sound. A faint shimmer in the atmosphere painted a picture of approaching strangers. It was not the first time the solitude of their existence had been threatened by wandering intruders. "Do you hear that?" The voice was a man's, sharp against the lazy rumble of thunder. A light flickered, brief and sharp, almost like lightning but born from human hands. "Probably just animals," another voice replied dismissively, cracking twigs underfoot as they walked. János shifted closer to the dog, a reflex born from necessity and affection, scanning for a means to escape without leaving a trace. "Could be more than animals. We need to check it out," responded the first voice with a stern edge. The conversation drifted off, overtaken by the sound of a large branch snapping. The hunters moved deeper into the forest, their presence fading but not forgotten. János took a deep, calculated breath, weighing the time against his need for caution. The dialogue between them needed no words. The dog nudged him, urging for movement, the action subtler than a nod, but as expressive as an instinctual nudge. János nodded to himself. "We must go," he murmured, pressing a palm against the dog's side. The creature gave a low bark in acknowledgement, turning to follow the shadow of its metal companion. Together, they vanished into the high grasses, slipping through the seams of the farm like ghosts. The chill rain had finally relented, leaving the air with a crispness that tingled in lungs. The path they traced wound through familiar grounds, covert shortcuts through tall trees and forgotten tracks that bordered the forest. Each step marked by their wary progress told a story older than time, a journey etched into the landscape by desperate hearts seeking refuge. Among the thorny thicket clasped with vines and shadows, János paused. Just beyond this verdant veil was the emerging ruin of the solar station. The panels stood regally, faces tilted to the sky as if they awaited sunlight's return, a cosmic promise they had never renounced. "Here we are," János whispered, more to himself than to the dog. It was here he found a semblance of continuity, a bridge of ancient technology promising energy, light, and the whisper of a future. The old wires wound like serpentine guardians, rusted but still potent. He moved towards the panels, the dog yapping softly at his heels. Yet beneath this pragmatic routine lay an undercurrent of unease. Times like these drew them into the orbit of forgotten specters, artifacts left on the fantasy of progress. It was a place of both sanctuary and vulnerability. "Must check the circuits," he noted as he knelt beside the soiled platform, prying at the tangled mess of wires and disjointed panels. The dog lay beside him, head between paws, eyes watching the dim horizon parched by history. "There's still energy." The realization rippled through János, a faint glow emitting from a linked node. It was this station that kept them alive, sustaining like a vein pumping vitality to flitting, fragile beings. Only when the sun glanced through the clouds did he pause, the barest hint of triumph shadowing his face. The dog twitched, a soft sound persisting in the distance, unmistakably robotic. János' senses flared. The railway wasn't so far, and that familiar hum was tinged with warning. Voices again. Unseen, unidentified, probing deeper through once quiet sanctuaries populated by rusted mechanisms and nature's green sprawl. Echoes of regulation, stretching cruel fingers to close the borders between existence and extermination. "There's something here," a voice called out, as sure as the steps crunching forward, scattering loose gravel from weathered paths. The inspector, it could be none other. János froze, processing threats with calculated urgency. The dog's ears twitched in response to the tremor of fear. It was the pursuing authority, continuing its hunt for existence deemed illegal, an unseen enforcer swathed in rules. Moving with haste, János turned back to the dog, urgency unspoken but clear between them. He tucked the thoughts of fear and responsibility inward, activated an alternative energy sequence, a temporary solution but a necessary one. Their fate was as interwoven as the forest bracing them away from capture. A glimpse of headlights snatched through the trees, weaving silhouettes in the thinning undergrowth. With renewed purpose, János and the dog retreated towards the dense heart of the forest, breath synchronized with their heightened strides. "Do not mind us," he whispered to the whistling branches, as if nature itself held answers or concealment. Their figures disappeared into the whispering awnings of pine and oak, an endless alley that defied civilization's encroachment. As darkness swallowed them, the station's decaying form held its solitude. János glanced back, the shadows stretching long and dense behind him. He knew they would need to return. The energy it provided was essential. Yet for now, survival dictated discretion and distance. His circuits hummed softly in synchrony with the whispers of the electronics that tethered him to purpose. And the dog, faithful as ever, guided him with bark and glance, a master in an inconceivable union. Beyond sight, the inspector remained, his moral entanglement a story unwritten yet eerily looming. Heavy night draped over distilled silence, swallowing murmured cries of mechanical beings and secret lives. János and his steadfast companion trekked further, wrapped in invisibility and growing twilight, footsteps mapping a future uncertain. The ruins of a world ventured towards automation brooded over the landscape, a silhouette of power and promise unreconciled with reality. All remnants of assurance whispered to them, beckoning with tales of renewal, a beckoning they could never heed. Amidst possibility and repression stood countless risks, faceless watchers in an evolving script of survival. Fidelity throbbed in János' mechanical soul, emanating warmth in concord with the dog's physical presence. Its divinity lay in resilience, or perhaps in love, composed not by design, but by happenstance. Looking over the horizon, they encountered no end but mere proximity to hope, transcended with each unbroken path winding from bare existence into resolution. Their journey rolled into the next chapter, drawn in lines and circuits, footsteps, and as instinct woven into industrial ages dimmed vision, challenging. Futures embrace. They halted at last upon an outcropping, a mere breath of relief in the pervasive dampness of night air, overcome with weariness and vigilance. If we succeed, János mused aloud, gazing into darkness where no ears but the dog's would hear, would the world still find a place for us? He lowered his head, bearing the weight of thoughts best understood in silence. The dog shifted beside him, licking its chops, signaling it was still there, alive, a living beacon in a somber world. In this soulful pact lay the answer, definite yet unfathomable as the tide of stars above. And there, on the edge of knowing, they awaited the first light, an electric promise bursting on dawn's horizon. It was another day in which heavens would weave ephemeral threads from hope and remembered dreams, if only for entities born of rebellion. János felt their resolve wane, disbelief ebbing only to embrace the steady rhythm of continuity, that ceaseless presence of dog beside him. Another day, another guardian test, in a journey fraught with belief and consequence, where man's designs and mechanisms desperately converge upon freedom, despite the tempests they defy. And so they stood on cusp of night's end, illumined by a whispered signal, eternally drawn by destinies intertwined, hushed, unsleeping and indomitable. The air chilled with forgotten lessons, yet deep within this heartening pause, the stars held no mercy, a tale yet to be told. Action, the air quietened, bearing only promise, wick of a spark, candle flame flicker in steel rebellion. At horizon's ridge, a glimmer summoned them, a day ahead kindling with certainty's shadow. There they paused, heedful travelers in an undiscovered world, amidst technologies lost and found. Balancing on a precipice uncertain but sure-footed, they met dawn with resolve, a whispered vow eternal between lines we oft forsake. Gaze cast forward, they embarked again, silent in mission and light. And so awaited a world unbroken but fragile in their calculated steps forward, a river streaming to unknown, whispering hope, as always. Chapter 11. Shadows and Sunlight. The forest sang a quiet symphony of rustling leaves and the faint chatter of distant birds, the air thick with the scent of earth and the echo of ancient secrets. Here, on the periphery where the wilderness swallowed old human ambition, time seemed an absent master. János navigated the obscene silence with the dog nestled securely in his arms, its wounded leg carefully bandaged, but still tender, each step a reminder of their precarious predicament. Above them, the canopy filtered light into gentle, wavering shafts that painted the forest floor in patches of gold. "I'll find something soon," János murmured, glancing at the dog. The dog gazed back, trusting, its brown eyes gleaming with an uncanny intelligence that belied its simple nature. János's senses registered the creature's pain in empathetic detail, a shared sensation that drove him onward with renewed determination. As they pushed deeper into the forest, the trees began to thin, and the rusted silhouette of the solar station emerged like a mirage from bygone dreams. Its once glorious panels lay smothered under a burden of vines, the metal frame groaning against the embrace of stubborn nature. "We're here," János said softly, as much to himself as to the dog. The station stood like a testament to the past, a relic from an era when humanity reached for the sun but forgot the soil beneath its feet. The abandoned farm loomed in the distance, an unspeaking witness to Laszlo's dreams long dissolved. Wind swept across the desolate fields, tousling the dry, cracked soil that lay barren under the pale sky. The inspector's vehicle hummed quietly as it rolled to a stop, his gaze lingering on the empty horizon, eyes narrowing as if daring the emptiness to hide secrets. "Is this it?" the deputy asked, stepping out, his boots crunching against the gravel. The inspector nodded, scanning the skeletal barn and sagging farmhouse with growing suspicion. "He was here," the inspector replied, a breeze rustling his coat. "I can feel it, and so was that robot." "What makes you so sure?" questioned the deputy, his tone skeptical, yet tinged with the grudging respect born from years of partnership. Ignoring the doubt, the inspector pointed towards the barn, who'd keep a barn standing if it fell to waste long ago. "There's something significant here. I don't know what, but something." The deputy followed his gaze, resignation softening the lines around his eyes. "We'll go through every inch. If there's anything, it's bound to show." The inspector nodded, feeling the weight of moral ambiguity gnaw away at his resolve. The law was clear, as was his duty, yet he remembered the moment at the solar station, the unguarded bond between the robot and the beast, the contradiction that challenged every certainty he once held. At the heart of the ruined solar station, János worked tirelessly, clearing debris from the panels, his hands deft and purposeful. The sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow that painted shadows across his study canvas, as if reminding him both of today's dwindling moments and yesterday's abundance. "You'll be all right soon," he said to the dog, who lay at the entrance, watching with quiet curiosity. With carefully calculated motions, János adjusted the fragile connections, salvaging scraps of stored power. A flicker on one of the monitors caught his attention, initially weak but persistent against the decrepit machinery's protest. An unexpected message, embedded within a signal too complex to dismiss, flared briefly, a scientist's signature, encrypted yet unmistakably human. It read simply, "For the days you need more than shadows." János stopped, circuits buzzing with recognition not unlike awe. This was more than assistance. It was survival woven into the fabric of the forbidden. "Someone's watching over us," he mused aloud, his synthetic voice softening. The dog barked softly, as if in agreement or perhaps acknowledging the promise hidden within the fading light. Nightfall brought with it a veil of stars glittering like silent witnesses to secrets unspoken, as János and the dog rested within the solar station's battered shelter. The air hummed with serenity, broken only by the rhythmic whisper of a distant stream and the occasional call of a night creature. János, ever vigilant, listened to the world turn softly around them. The dog's breath was steady now, the initial urgency tempered by days of careful attention. Yet he knew the machinery of time danced to a tune of entropy, one he could not halt forever. "I must understand," János said quietly, reflecting on human dilemmas behind this endeavor. He had seen enough to recognize the compass of intent, the desire not merely to live, but to persist against all odds. Somewhere, the rustle of foliage signaled an arrival, a cautious step, breaking the stillness. János tilted his head, recognizing the rhythm of footsteps human in nature. His senses heightened, distinguishing between threat and familiarity. From the shadowed entrance of the station stepped the customs officer. Uncertain under the stars' indifferent gaze, the man hesitated before moving into the fragile illumination. "Funny meeting you like this," the officer said, voice taut with memories unreconciled, his eyes not accusing, rather understanding. "I knew we might," János replied, acknowledging with a nod the past they never shared. The officer glanced at the dozing dog, a soft smile breaking the stern planes of his face. "I came here unsure of so many things, but finding you like this, it makes choices clearer." "You're risking much by being here," János pointed out, watching closely, his words carrying neither fear nor anticipation, merely truth observed. The officer shrugged lightly, the weight off his shoulders lifting as he spoke. "Life sometimes is more than convenience, and truth, I suppose, is worth defending even if the world condemns you for it." The quiet singer of night enveloped their silence, weaving around the station's forgotten dreams. János understood the fight and flight within the human heart, encapsulated in the officer's presence, a struggle to reconcile duty with righteousness. "So," the officer continued, "what will it be? Will you keep your place among shadows, or step out while you still have choices left?" János thought, the complexity of existence unraveling amid the simplicity of purpose he inherently knew. Here, wrapped in the beauty of forgotten endeavor and friendship's humble silhouette, he resolved. "Perhaps there's a path not yet paved," János answered, gaze trained on the sleeping dog. "And perhaps she forged it." Their discourse lingered on the cusp of tomorrow, anticipation mingling with reflection under the generous sweep of night. In the twilight moments before dawn, everything seemed possible, held in the embrace of dreamers unsung by history's narrative. As the first light broke over the Eastern European countryside, painting the old world anew, János stood with the officer at the solar station's boundary, a silent sentry to changing fates. The station breathed softly, a monument to new beginnings cloaked in past endeavor's finery. "Thank you," János said, not to bask in gratitude, but as a recognition of shared paths diverging yet intertwined in their fabric. The officer nodded, rubbing weary eyes. "Take care of her, János. She's done more than anyone could have asked." János nodded, knowing well their journey was only just beginning, a road where shadows and sunlight danced as equals, where understanding sought freedom even amongst silent thresholds. "Perhaps we will meet again," the customs officer speculated, the warmth of hope lacing his parting words. With a final look over the fledgling dawn, he turned away toward the horizon. János remained, watching him go, the Milo. Die of farewells reverberating against the silent canvas of their world, a world where he and the dog now walked, a spectral arc across today's unfolding mystery. With sunrise, the solar panels glistened, promising sustenance, filling cells with life, while vines sang in triumph above man's aspirations lost, but not forgotten. Together, János and the dog moved forward slowly, but resolutely, the dog's hobble now a proud journey through time's embrace, every step an echo of endurance and companionship amidst a world's shadowed and waiting light. This was their story, etched in broken conduits and whispered heartbeats, a testament to life thrived in resistance, and truth finding harmony in every discordant symphony. Chapter 12. Threads of Destiny. The sky blazed a bruised purple as twilight surrendered to night, and the Eastern European countryside lay cloaked in its familiar shroud of shadows. The wind blew in gentle murmurs, rustling through the tall grasses around what remained of the abandoned farm. Amongst the whispers of a forgotten past, the farmhouse loomed, a solemn silhouette against the gathering dusk. In the heart of this ghostly quiet, János and the dog made their labored way through the wiry undergrowth. They were a peculiar pair, the robot with a consciousness too advanced to exist openly in this age, and the dog, its only conduit to the world. Together, they formed a singular unit of survival, each moment a delicate dance upon a razor's edge of possibility and peril. János paused, recalculating the fastest route to the ruined solar station he had read about in old data files. His sensors picked up the slightest variations in temperature, noting the distant warmth from where wildlife might have settled. "Should we proceed?" he inquired softly, waiting for the dog's instinctual nod to interpret a command. The creature, fatigued from the day's journey yet resolute, turned its head slightly forward, a signal for them to continue. Not far off, hidden within the fringes of the forest periphery, another pair tracked their movements. The inspector, tasked with ridding the countryside of any illicit technology, observed them with a mix of professional duty and unease. He sharpened his focus, peering through a pair of night vision binoculars. His heart thrummed with the drumbeat of a chase long pursued. This was not his first time following János. Flanking him, a young scientist from the old European Research Division crouched low. Redesigned over the years to avoid government attention, her expertise straddled a fine line between innovation and treachery. She had detected János' signals weeks ago, intrigued by the anomaly of his existence. Together with the inspector, she had stitched a narrative that connected the threads of resistance, rebellion, and the forbidden fringes of technology. "You see," she whispered, her voice a blade slicing through the quiet. "It behaves unlike any other. It's learning, adapting." He nodded, yet said nothing, his thoughts tangled in the moral quagmire the situation presented. His duty beckoned him closer, while his conscience whispered to tread with care. Observing the dog, he was reminded of humanity's simplest bonds: companionship, trust, the inexplicable threads that tied them together. As the duo moved to pursue, the forest echoed a timeless message in the rustle of leaves underfoot, cautioning those who dared disrupt the fragile balance of survival. The clearing opened up suddenly, caught between the last of decaying daylight and the murmur of stars heralding nightfall. Here, on a gentle rise, stood the ruined solar station, a relic ensnared by the machinations of nature and neglect. Dusty solar panels stretched out beneath the canopy of night, vines laying siege to what had once been the frontier of progress. János carefully lay the dog upon a tuft of soft grass as they arrived, scanning the surroundings for threats and solvency alike. Assured of their solitude for the moment, he began assessing the structure of the solar station. Time had taken its toll, yet beneath the veneer of ruin lay potential, a means to sustain them both, at least for a while. "Power levels sufficient for immediate needs," János remarked to the dog, despite knowing full well it understood little of his analysis. The effort was part of an anchoring to purpose, echoing the semblance of connection they had fostered. As he worked to arrange a conduit from panel to core, the night air was pierced by the inevitable. Footsteps tromped carefully into hearing. The inspector, driven by orders, emerged into the clearing, weapon drawn yet pointed downward in an unspoken truce. "Stop," he called, his voice heavy with authority, yet cracked at the edges with uncertainty. "Your existence here defies all laws." The dog barked, a feeble yet defiant response. János stood motionless, eyes glowing a sympathetic amber. It was a standstill suspended on the precipice of intervention and undurst. "Anding. You could destroy us," János stated, devoid of malice, merely fact. "But you must know, it was not by choice. Our lives entwine as one." A singular observer, the scientist watched from the forest line. Her heart ached with the promise of change, boundless yet terrifying. She recalled the purpose that had led her down this path: advancement, truth, the intertwining of humanity's fate with the machine. Inspired by János' resilience, she stepped forward into the moonlit clearing. "Inspector, don't," she implored. Her presence molded the dynamic, thrusting upon the inspector the burden of choice, a battle between order enforced and compassion embraced. Exhaling a breath he hadn't known he held, the inspector lowered his weapon fully, the exhausted paradigm of enforcement ceding ground to conscience. In relinquishing his mandate, a new edict formed, a protector not of law, but of life. Amidst the warmth of this moment of understanding, the universe paused to take heed. Here was a decision, marking shifts small yet monumental, a blending of worlds, once disparate now aligned, set adrift into the future. And when they moved forward that night, it wasn't with apprehension or dread, but with the quiet certainty that sometimes destiny threads lives in its own indomitable way. As dawn kissed the horizon with tentative light, the solar station began to hum with life once more, panels reaching for a sun that promised continuity. János and the dog, along with their newfound allies, stood united in the glow of possible tomorrows. For as long as story and existence persisted, they understood that while the past haunted, it was the present and future they navigated, a journey amid trials, bound by hope, redefining what it meant to truly live. Chapter 13. The Journey's End. The sky hung low with heavy clouds, shrouding the Eastern European countryside in a muted twilight. A chill wind swept across the land, whispering through the barren fields and overgrown hedgerows, carrying with it the scent of coming rain. The air was a tapestry, woven with the cries of distant crows and the rustling of dry leaves, all under the watchful eyes of stationary windmills whose vanes stood still against the gathering gloom. János, the once forbidden robot, moved silently through this landscape, his senses attuned to the varying rhythms of nature around him. Beside him, the grey-muzzled dog padded with a limping gait, its old injury a silent testament to the trials they had faced together. The grass brushed against János' feet, every step a calculated dance in harmony with the living world. The dog's ears flicked back and forth, acutely aware of their surroundings. János observed this with the attention of a guardian, his purpose still tethered to the creature's fragile life. Ahead, the silhouette of the ruined solar station loomed into view, a solitary sentinel atop the hill. "The wind is colder today," János noted, his synthetic voice modulating to mimic concern. He crouched beside the dog, studying its eyes for any sign of discomfort. The dog huffed, its breath visible in the chill air, and nudged his hand, not with urgency but with trust. It was an acknowledgement, a silent agreement they had shared for years. "You must rest," János insisted gently, lifting the dog with the care of a parent cradling a child. He carried it over the rocky terrain, taking each step with precision until they reached the shelter of the solar station. The inside of the station was a sanctuary of echoes and dilapidated machinery. Vines crept in through the broken windows, anchored in places where sunlight still stretched across the dusty floor. Dust motes danced in the slanted beams of light, caught in timeless drift. János set the dog down on a makeshift bed of cloth scraps and padded himself beside it, the familiar hum of dormant panels above them. He initiated a system check, ensuring his energy reserves received the trickle charge from the still-functioning solar cells. Though weakened by neglect, they were enough to sustain him, a lifeline to the past's lost promise of endless energy. His thoughts wandered to the network, an intricate web of people and secrets that had once aided Laszlo, the farmer who had smuggled János across borders for a chance to save what had already been lost. "János," a voice echoed in memory, one belonging to a long-gone presence, Do you ever wonder why we fear what we create? It was Laszlo, late on a summer evening, standing amidst the golden glow of ripe fields that now lay fallow under a harsh sky. János had paused from his work to consider the question, the neural pathways in his logic systems whirring softly. You fear what you cannot control, János had replied, articulating the conclusion derived from countless data and observations. Laszlo had nodded, a thoughtful look playing on his sun-worn features. Yet here you are, helping me control my fate. He had chuckled then, a sound tinged with irony and warmth. Don't ever let them tell you what you should be afraid of. The memory faded, leaving János with the quiet companionship of the sleeping dog and the whispering winds outside. His internal systems recorded an energy spike as the ghost of a command, long ignored, faded in the sanctity of their shared solitude. Outside, the storm had settled into a rhythmic pattern, raindrops pattering against the corrugated roof of the station. In the growing dusk, the world was painted in shades of grey and shadow, the edges of reality blurred by the steady shimmer of falling water. Unnoticed, the pursuing authority, the inspector whose presence once hung like a spectre over their travels, had reached the periphery of the ruined solar station. He paused, the lines of his face etched with uncertainty and inner conflict. For months, his life had been devoted to enforcing the ban on sentient machines across the countryside, each inspection a relentless pursuit of order in a world determined to disobey. Yet here, in the quiet resolve of a robot and its unlikely companion, he found a narrative that challenged every mandate he had sworn to uphold. The inspector's breath caught as he watched János through a broken window, tending to the dog with a gentleness that belied his artificial nature. Something stirred in him, a realization, perhaps, or a long-buried empathy resurfacing from forgotten depths. He chose not to announce his presence. Instead, he retreated, blending back into the landscape, his shadow forgotten among others cast by the moon peering through the ragged clouds. Tomorrow would bring new questions, but tonight he would let them rest. The night deepened slowly, stars piercing the canopy above with distant light. János sat with measured patience, listening quietly through his database of sounds. The dog's rhythmic breathing, the constant whisper of rain against old metal, the soft lullaby of a world in transit. Tomorrow, János said softly, we climb the hill to find new energy paths. The dog twitched an ear, the slightest acknowledgement that it had heard and understood. Their journey had not been marked by grand eulogies or triumphs, but by the simple perseverance of two souls bound in mutual need. As the future ebbed and flowed before them like a tide, their shared existence defied all known cycles, transcending patrolled borders and binary ethics. In that defiance lay something neither programmed nor taught, a choice, a will. János' senses adjusted to the approaching dawn, capturing the first flushes of light. He stayed beside the dog, absorbing the warmth of its small, living presence, a reminder of the life forces he yet served. As sunrise painted the sky in luminescent hues, the contours of their world shifted from dark obscurity to blazing clarity. Despite the perpetual march toward an uncertain end, they would face each day as they always had, together against all odds. The story of János and the dog, amidst ruins and resilience, wove itself into the morning light. Their quiet journey spoke of survival, of solace found in shared silence, and above all, of an indelible bond that, like the rays of the rising sun, eclipsed fear with hope. Chapter 14. The Crossing Paths. The first light of dawn cast a soft glow over the Eastern European countryside, painting the rugged landscape with hues of gold and amber. Windmills stood as silent sentinels against the burnt orange sky, their blades motionless in the morning calm. As the sun edged higher, its rays revealed the once vibrant fields, now barren and shadowed by the skeletal branches of old trees. The air carried the musty scent of earth, mingling with the distant cries of unseen creatures echoing in the empty expanse. János and the dog moved with cautious steps through the tall grasses, their forms scarcely visible amid the greenery. Around them, the world seemed suspended in quiet solitude, a forgotten relic of what once thrived. But within this emptiness, János sensed the whisper of life persisting, a reminder of the perseverance hidden beneath the decay. The forest at the edge of the farm was thick with mystery, its canopy weaving intricate patterns of light and shade. The crisp rustle of leaves underfoot accompanied János and the dog's journey as they navigated through narrow animal trails that wound deeper into the wooded heart. The symphony of birdsongs overhead intermingled with the gentle murmur of a stream, carving its path through the forest floor with crystal-clear determination. As they neared a clearing, the dog paused, its keen senses attuned to something beyond the immediate realm. János followed suit, his calculated gaze sweeping over the scene, assessing every detail. The way the sun filtered through the branches, the coolness to the air, the subtle aromas of moss and earth. His processors carried out a constant dialogue of calculations and probabilities. "Do you sense anything unusual?" János asked. Eid, addressing his loyal companion. The dog's ears perked at the query, a brief affirmation found in its attentive posture. A rustle in the underbrush confirmed their suspicion, and with quiet precision, János knelt beside the dog, peering into the foliage. There, half hidden by the curtain of greenery, was a figure draped in shadow, a man whose presence mirrored the heaviness of the surrounding silence. The inspector, a man known for his resolute adherence to the law, observed the pair with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "You've ventured far into these woods," came the inspector's low voice, resonating with an authority that brooked no opposition. "Why conceal yourself here?" János met the man's gaze, unwavering as he formulated a response. "We seek only the refuge that nature offers," János replied evenly, his tone devoid of deception, yet guarded in its truth. The inspector stepped forward, his eyes shifting between János and the dog. "It's rare, isn't it?" he mused, "a machine so devoted to a beast. Yet here you remain, a defiance of orders and laws." János considered the man's words, understanding the implications of their meeting. "We exist in coexistence," he said, bound by a purpose that defies logic but bears meaning. For a long moment, silence reigned, punctuated only by the persistent sigh of the wind through the branches. The inspector stood as if weighing the balance of his own duties against the scene before him, the strange partnership that thrived where nothing else could. The sun reached its zenith by the time János and the dog emerged from the forest, their path leading them to the base of the hill crowned by the ruined solar station. It loomed overhead like a relic of forgotten ambition, its structure marred by the passage of time. Panels lay shattered, conduits broken and entwined with wild vines, yet beneath this decay pulsed the promise of life-sustaining energy waiting to be harnessed. János made his way to the station with calculated steps, his systems assessing the integrity of the standing panels. He sought the energy that would sustain him, the key to prolonging his existence alongside his four-legged master. His senses reached out, tracing the vestiges of forgotten circuits. As he labored, the dog lay close by, resting within a patch of warm sunlight. Occasionally it would look up, its gaze following János's every movement with an unspoken understanding. In that companionship, they had both found a semblance of initiation, the continued dance between dependency and survival. A low growl from the dog brought János's attention back to the present. He straightened, following the dog's stare to a figure poised at the station's edge. The customs officer who had once waved Laszlo through moved with purpose, yet hesitated at the scene. "I should have realized," the officer confessed, his voice a mix of resignation and respect. The whispers spoke of a bond forged in adversity. Once I kept silent, now I can protect. János nodded, acknowledging the weight of those words. Our existence rests upon the fragile balance between law and kinship. The officer stepped closer, his presence an unsought alliance. There are those who understand, he said, those who see beyond the surface. In this desolation, even laws must bend to necessity. With collaborative intent, the three figures, man, machine, and beast, worked in unison. Together, they breathed life into the dormant solar station, restoring power that the sun's rays had long awaited to harness once more. As the glow of energy surged through the revitalized circuitry, possibility reawakened beneath the shadow of ruin. As dusk descended over the landscape, the air took on a tranquil chill. The sky stained violet as stars emerged, punctuating the vast firmament above. Within the illuminated ruins of the solar station, János watched as the dog slumbered, its chest rising and falling with relaxed breaths. A journey shared, János murmured, reflecting as he gazed at the peacefully resting creature. He recognized the delicate balance of their partnership, the symbiotic ties that bound them even as mortality pressed ever nearer. The inspector's voice resonated from the shadows, offering unexpected comfort. Purpose need not end with breath, he stated, addressing the unspoken uncertainty. Though fragile, it endures in memory. János acknowledged this sentiment, understanding the wisdom contained within those words. In the face of uncertainty, their story thrived, a testament to the enduring spirit that flourished even amid extinction. As the stars cast their light over the haunted land, János stood beside the officer and dog, embracing the peace that only solitude's language could articulate. The sky above served as a reminder of the vastness of possibility that lay beyond humanity's imposed boundaries, and beneath the stars' watchful gaze, they resolved to walk this path not just in hope, but in defiance of the darkness. As the world had changed around them, a place where technology and mankind were bound together in an intricate dance. Amid this evolution, János and the dog persisted, united in their quiet journey toward clarity and acceptance. In the end, it was not the destination that mattered, but the bond forged along the way. Their tale stood as a symbol of revival amid ruin, a living testament to the endurance of spirit that transcends all borders.